everyone, and welcome back to this episode of Just Another Year Chicago. My name is Nick Roti. I'm joined alongside London Beth, and no turtleneck because no turtleneck is deserved today. Let's just get into it. Andy Dalton is going to be the starting quarterback for the Chicago Bears right now, week 1 of 2021. London, initial reaction. Let's hear it.
Initial reaction is I woke up this morning, rolled out of bed. It's kind of rainy outside here. I drank about 6 cups of coffee, contemplated what was going on, called my cousin. We had about a 35-minute conversation, and the whole conversation was just pretty much exactly what I heard on all the major radio stations in Chicago, just irritation. And honestly, just, I don't know, maybe the feeling of betrayal. So I muddled it with tons of coffee, and I'm hopefully ready to go with this.
There was a slight chance there was Bailey's or Jack Daniels or something mixed in there.
Possibly.
Absolutely. No, I think that everyone in Chicago is having the same exact reaction, kind of a like, what the hell just happened? How do you go from an elite quarterback like Russell Wilson in discussion, Deshaun Watson in discussion, David Carr even in discussion, and you end up with a guy named Andy Dalton, who was 0-4 in the playoffs with the Cincinnati Bengals, who was the guy who came in for Dak Prescott last year for the Dallas Cowboys, threw 14 touchdowns and 8 picks with 2,200 passing yards in 9 games. Fine. You know what? Decent stats. Mitch put up the same stats. When Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace are on the line, supposedly, and this is it for them. This is the biggest thing in Chicago. This is the biggest year offseason in franchise history. And you go out and get Andy Dalton, a backup quarterback from Dallas, an aging quarterback, a guy who really can't move as well as Mitch Trubisky with our uncertain offensive line. And then you overpay him $7 million where we could have had him last year for $3 million and not picked up Nick Foles and lost a 4th-round pick. I was pissed. First, I didn't even know what to say on Twitter. I know no one knew what to say. I was sitting in a meeting when it happened. It was just a big, what the hell? I texted, 5 of my close Bears fans, texted you first. And everyone's just like, did that really just happen? Is there something more behind this?
Yeah, so, and I want to make a personal apology from every single human being, every single Chicago Bears fan out there. We all need to personally apologize to Mike Wilbon on pardon the interruption on ESPN, because he's been telling us since Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy came that it's going to be a dumpster fire. They're going to have one good year, and then after that, it's going to be a dumpster fire. He's been preaching that on ESPN, and everybody's like, oh, he's just the kooky old guy on pardon the interruption. But gosh, man, he was right. And he had, and yesterday he went absolutely off, and man, Chicago owes him such a huge apology. He's a diehard Bears fan, and he's just embarrassed because we're 102 years. We're one of the first franchises ever. And honestly, Mike, if I ever get to talk to you, I apologize. Everybody apologizes for thinking you're just some crazy old kook.
Well, I totally agree with that. Again, it's a lot of frustration, but let's go into breaking everything down with Andy Dalton. Let's learn who he is as a quarterback. We know that he played for the Cincinnati Bengals, had some pretty good years there when he was younger. First 5 years of his career were great, and the worst thing is that walking into Hallis Hall today, Andy Dalton is the greatest Bears quarterback ever on paper. That says something about this franchise. Second greatest quarterback ever, Jay Cutler. Third greatest quarterback ever, Sid Luckman. London and I's parents weren't even a thought when Sid Luckman was playing. Okay? Just a complete disaster of a franchise in regards to the quarterback position. You've had one of the greatest running backs of all time. You've had some of the greatest linebackers of all time. You've had one of the greatest defensive ends of all time in Khalil Mack. And that's, I'm not saying he's not Lawrence Taylor level, by no means. But you've had Richard Dent. You've had Otis Wilson. You had Mike Singletary. You've had Willie Galt, Walter Payton. You've had Dick Butkus, Brian Urlacher, Lance Briggs. The list goes on and on and on about great players that have played for this franchise. Most Hall of Famers out of any team in the NFL. And you're telling me that one of those Hall of Famers isn't a quarterback? Come on. Like, Ryan Pace is a great defensive assistant to the general manager. He can build a defense with his eyes closed. He's good at that. That's the Chicago Bear way. But offense, not so much. You got lucky with Allen Robinson. You got real lucky with David Montgomery. Tyreek Cohen, you're good at late round diamonds in the rough, but you cannot go out and get a quarterback. So, London, your thoughts initially, Andy Dalton versus Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky in rankings. Would you rather have Dalton over them, or who do you want?
Well, a lot of Bears fans out there are putting like, hey, bring Mitch back, do something with that. I think he's
not going to happen.
I think he's out. I think he's going to go probably, I would say he's going to go possibly to like the 49ers, maybe be a backup there, contest, if Jimmy Garoppolo keeps getting injured.
Right.
The Rams with Matthew Stafford kind of have some, go back up Matthew. Maybe a little familiarity there. I think Mitch is gone. I think he's, and honestly, Mitch, if you're out there, throw me in your suitcase. I'll come with you.
Right.
So it comes down to, right. And so it comes down to Andy versus Nick Foles. Yes, I'm going to lean towards Andy Dalton just because of the more Pro Bowls, better yards, all that kind of stuff like that. But he's not a winner. At least Nick Foles proved that he was a winner, but I think Nick Foles is completely washed up. I think something happened down there in Jacksonville, Florida, where it just, he got benched, to Gardner Minshew. And I just think he lost something there. And I don't really know what it is or how he can re-tap into that. So, of course, I'm going to take Andy Dalton over Nick Foles. I think Mitch is completely out of the question. I don't even think he's a part of it anymore. Thank God to him. And so now it's just like, what are we going to roll out with? Are we going to roll out with like great summer quarterback competition of Andy Dalton and Nick Foles? Like, yippee,
nothing exciting. It's
everybody.
not sexy. That's not sexy. A competition between Foles and Trubisky was more fun because that was, Nick Foles, we still thought of him as this Super Bowl MVP quarterback that got hurt and we got him for a 4th round pick. People were praising when Nick Foles came here. And now everyone's like, what the hell? Is he, and the question is he still really the problem? Would Foles have done better in Bill Lazor's offense? Because he did not play at all. He played under Nagy's offense the whole time. This is where the optimism comes in. This is where everyone's kind of like, we wanted Russell Wilson, we wanted an elite quarterback, but who is really the issue in this organization? You and I have kind of talked about before. Pace has made great moves. Okay. Great moves. But you got a guy like Matt Nagy in there. It's just a disaster. Look what happened to the Chiefs once Nagy left. They win a Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes gets $500 million. It's just what is the problem in this organization? Nagy's supposed to be the quarterback whisperer. And I agree with you. This is not good. I'm leaning towards Andy Dalton too. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt because he's a proven regular season better quarterback than Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky. There's no doubt about that. Let me break down some stats for you. All right, London, you ready?
Ready.
Over the last decade, Andy Dalton in 8 seasons has had 3,200 yards or more, 2 of them being 4,000 passing yards. When was the last time a Bears quarterback had 4,000 passing yards? Never. It's never happened. Closest it got was Jay Cutler. 3,200 yards? Sure. Jay Cutler got that, I believe, twice or 3 times during his career here. So, all right, 33,000 passing yards in 10 years with a 3,300 yard average over that duration. Not bad. That's not bad. 87.5 career passer rating. I mean, you're not at 60, you're not at 70 like Mitch Trubisky and Nick Foles. You're in that 80 range, but that 80 range came for the first 8 years. The last 2 years have been a dumpster fire for this guy. He lost his swagger. In 10 years, Andy Dalton has 6 seasons with 20 more touchdown passes and one of them having 33 touchdowns. I'll take it. That's not bad. That's better than Rex Grossman, better than Kyle Orton, better than Jay Cutler, better than Mitch Trubisky, Chase Stanton, you name it, the whole list goes on. Better than that. That's an upgrade in that category. But when did that come? The first 8 years. The last 2 years, he's, regressed. 218 touchdown passes, 126 interceptions. That sounds a whole lot better than any stat of a Chicago Bears quarterback over his career. Almost a 2-to-1 ratio. Not bad. 3-time Pro Bowler, 4 playoff games, all losses. One of the playoff games having 350 passing yards. So that's who Andy Dalton is. Last season with the Cowboys, he played in 9 games, 14 touchdowns, 8 picks. Sounds like Mitch Trubisky without the legs. And a great thing about Andy Dalton 8 years ago was that he could run the ball. Andy Dalton, I believe, has 22 career. Yeah, he does have 22 career rushing touchdowns. All right, fine. Guy can move with his feet. Cutler wasn't a sexy runner. Mitch was fast. That's what this league has come to. You need a fast quarterback to get around. if you don't have an offensive line, which the Bears apparently didn't have the first half of the season. And then suddenly you get Sam Mustipher in there. You know, you lose James Daniel. That's a huge loss. One of the better interior young guards in the league. But you get Sam Mustipher in there. Adaifi, what I still can't say. You could say his last name. I can't say his last name. He got better. Leno got better. Whitehair was the number 3 interior guard of that offensive line in the league behind Trent Williams and Quentin Nelson. Pretty elite company. Dalton has a line. And it looks like the Bears are likely to go out. And if Andy Dalton's the guy, which we discussed before this podcast, if he is the guy, the Bears are going to use that first rounder on a starting left tackle or a right tackle. Like, that's who Andy Dalton is, and that's what Andy Dalton has coming in. He is an upgrade in regards to a true quarterback. You know, thoughts on all those stats, London. I mean, like, and that's for everyone watching. Like, everyone watching needs to know, like, go and look at his stats. It's an upgrade on paper, but you need to realize what he's been dealing with the last couple of years. And in Dallas last year, he didn't have much. Dallas was a dumpster fire too. And it's a dumpster fire even when Dak is your quarterback. London, thoughts? Yeah. I mean, I haven't put it out there for someone to hear it.
Yeah, a lot of people were saying, like, hey, he has more. Like, a lot of people on, like, when it first happened, like, oh, you know, Chicago has more, or not Chicago, Dallas has more weapons than Chicago and all this other stuff. First off, Dallas's line depleted. They do have a phenomenal offensive line, but most of them were injured. Okay. Yep. You know, the receivers couldn't stay healthy. Zeke couldn't stay healthy. I mean, they really were quite depleted. And for him to go out there and do something, yeah, that was great.
And the worst defense in the league.
Yeah, I agree. With the worst defense in the league, I agree. Yeah. My biggest glaring issue is this. When he played, and I heard this early on the radio, when Andy Dalton played really, really well, okay, when he had those 33 touchdown years, when they were going, you know, he was a 3-time Pro Bowler, when they, you know, were going to the playoffs as like pretty high seeds and stuff, even though, again, they fell apart in the playoffs. They had great defenses in Cincinnati at the time. We have a great defense. So like, okay, I see that. And I see Harrison there. They had a good offensive line. We have a good offensive line. So, okay, so we're 2 for 2 right now. And I'm like, all right, maybe like it's not so bad. But then you look at the offensive weapons that he had. He had a young AJ Green. He had TJ Hushmanzada. He had
Chad Ochocinco.
Huh?
He had Chad Ochocinco.
Yeah, Chad Ochocinco. And who was his running back? It wasn't Cedric Benson yet. It was, oh man, that's gonna haunt me. It was a pretty good running back.
It was a good running back.
Yeah, a pretty good running back. So he had weapons all over the place. The Bears right now have Allen Robinson, who honestly, if I'm Allen Robinson, I'm not signing my tender. I'm going to hold out. You know, I'm going to try to go. And honestly, I would if I was him too. And then, you know, unless they're promising under the table, like, hey, we're going to draft a back, stick around, you know, you're going to be able to play with, you know, Justin Fields or somebody like that. But like, we don't like Darnell Mooney. Sure, good, is an absolute stud at wide receiver, but after that, it's nothing.
Yeah,
it is nothing. And so that's my biggest concern is, yes, we have a good defense. Yes, we have a good offensive line, but we don't have the weapons that Andy Dalton had at that time. He had a phenomenal offensive weapons, like some of the best in the NFL at that time. And they were dominating the Ravens and the Steelers. And, you know, the Browns were horrible back then, but they were dominating those teams because he could close his eyes and throw it to a young AJ Green, and AJ Green was coming down with everything. So
did you throw John Ross in there, by the way?
No, I don't think John Ross was like at the end kind of
but going off your point, he had a sexy offense, like, you know, on paper, like you're like, holy crap, how are the Bengals not beating everybody?
Yeah.
And, you know, I didn't mean to cut you off. Were you done?
That was the biggest thing is everybody was trying to compare them to the Bengals of before. And I just, like I said, that's the biggest thing I saw is we just don't have those offensive weapons. The problem is, yes, we kept our draft picks. So yes, we will be able, and we still possibly have some money lying around, do have a chance to bring in some players. But the thing is though, I'm going to bring in guys like a young AJ Green. Like we could bring in AJ Green, but he's an old AJ Green now.
Yeah.
We're not going to bring in a TJ Hushmanzada. We're not going to bring in a Chad Ochocinco. We're not going to bring like.
We're not going to bring in Kenny Galladay. We're not going to bring in. Yeah, we're not going to bring in anybody. Who are we going to bring in?
No, we're not going to get that talent, and it just stinks.
Yes, and the way you said it, there's an old AJ Green and a young AJ Green. You could say the exact same thing about Andy Dalton. There is a young Andy Dalton, and then there is an old Andy Dalton. Mm-hmm. So let me just throw a little bit more at you.
Hit me.
Andy Dalton is more accurate all time in his career than Foles and Trubisky. He has a little bit above a 62% completion percentage all time. Like you said, great wide receiver, great offensive line, great defenses, overall great team. He has a guy in Allen Robinson that can make it work. If he stays, is Allen Robinson going to stay? I don't think so. I really don't think so.
I'd be surprised.
I would rather trade him for assets at this point because he doesn't want to be here. He doesn't. And before this podcast, reports are coming out that the Bears are supposedly getting rid of Kyle Fuller because it's going to save them $11 million in cap. They're going to have $9 million in dead cap. Trade Fuller. Trade him to someone that wants him, that can give us, a second or a third. He is not a first-round corner by no means.
Yeah. Adoree Jackson's available. I mean, I know he hasn't lived up to that USC hype and those abilities, but like, we're not going to sign Cordell Patterson, bring in Adoree Jackson, put him across from Jalen Johnson, and also we get to retain a good kick and punt returner because Adoree's a great punt returner. So I don't know.
It's just an absolute mess here in Chicago, to say the least. And, for everyone that's listening, the stats look great. Everything looks right. 5 years ago, Bears fans would have been like, we got Andy Dalton.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's not the same anymore. This was
if it was if it was right after Jay Cutler was done and like before we got Mitch, if we had Andy Dalton like kind of in that range and then we had Andy Dalton, I think that would have been great. I think at that time, our team, our defense, our weapons, all that kind of different stuff like that would have worked a little better. Right now, we're that sleeping giant that we bring up every single week. And Andy Dalton is like, I would say 2 to 3 years past his prime.
Let me ask you this. If we would have had Andy Dalton in 2018, would that have been the year, would he have led the Bears to success? More than Mitch?
Yeah, maybe. Mitch was just on fire that year, though. I don't know. That Mitchell Trubisky was the Mitchell Trubisky I wished we got every year.
Right.
Do I think Andy Dalton maybe would have beat like the Eagles and not had to like have that utter fate of the double doink? Yes. But like he's 2-3 years past his prime.
Yeah.
And we get him. Like it's like we're a year behind every other team.
Yep.
And it kills me.
We're picking up the sloppy seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So let's make it clear to everyone after all this, and it's clear as mud. We are not saying that Andy Dalton's the answer. London's definitely saying he's not the answer. I'm saying that it is an upgrade in many respects.
I agree.
Compared to Mitch and Foles. Is it what we needed? By no means was it the answer. He's a better game manager than Mitch and Foles. He's statistically the best Bears quarterback ever walking into Hallis Hall. And he was the last option in free agency. If Seattle played us so hard, and I'm going to say this till put me in the grave saying we got played by Seattle, just another team messing with Chicago. We offered 3 first-round picks, a second-round pick, and 2 star starters for Russell Wilson. And Seattle said no. If you say no to an offer like that, it's really not happening. I would be shocked if Russell Wilson ends up moving to the Jets. The Jets would have to give up 4 first-round picks. Whoever on the Jets, the Seahawks would even want it. It's just not happening. He's staying in Seattle. And the problem is that we had to overpay Andy Dalton because we put ourselves in the position of being desperate. And his agent goes, all right, well, the Cowboys didn't need us last year because they had Dak Prescott. And we filled in and we did what we had to do. but you guys need a quarterback, and Andy's the only one left on the market that can be a good game manager for your team. That's what, if I'm Andy Dalton's agent, that's what I'm walking into Chicago saying. And that's why Ryan Pace probably just had to, take a deep breath and go, I really messed myself up on this one. I honestly would have taken Ryan Fitzpatrick. Ryan Fitzpatrick just made things happen. That's why his AKA Fitzmagic. I am not as disappointed as 1,000% of Bears fans are in Andy Dalton. I think that, again, it's an upgrade. I'm trying to look for, a little bit of clear water here.
Mm-hmm.
It's an upgrade. I am praying, though, that the Bears make a move in this upcoming draft. They have the 20th overall pick. We talked about this. I would love it if the Bears moved up and got a quarterback like Zach Wilson. And I know you don't like Zach Wilson, London. I know. He's cocky. He's got that attitude. The Bears don't need that. But when the Bears had that in 1985 at their quarterback with a very similar defense, a very similar running back, a wide receiver like Willie Gull, a.k.a. his name is Allen Robinson, and then a couple slack guys like Darnell Mooney, I think that year went pretty well for the Chicago Bears. And I think that's what they need. Chicago guys have that cocky swagger. I don't know why, you go to River North and you get a douchebag everywhere you go that's got a cocky swagger to him. That's just the Chicago way now, I guess.
Yeah.
Bring him in. And I mean, look at the highlights. I mean, you can't deny that Zach Wilson would be better than Andy Dalton. Not in a game manager, but athletically, Zach Wilson is a better quarterback than Andy Dalton. Let him learn. Let him learn a little bit. Throw him out there halfway through the season. March in. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Andy Dalton's winning games. Leave him in there. But, it's just so, London, out of all the quarterbacks that are left, you're not getting Trevor Lawrence. I'm going to take that guy right out of your wheelhouse. You don't want Zach Wilson. Trey Lance had a horrible pro day. Who are you taking if we move up?
This is another thing. I had a lot of time last night while I shut my phone off from all the group chats that I was getting roasted in. Kudos to the Trench Mafia. They gave it to me pretty hard last night. A lot of screenshots of receipts of me talking crap and saying that we're not going to get Andy Dalton. But what do we do now? I was listening to the score right when the news broke, and the biggest thing that they said was if we walk out Andy Dalton, and this is like preseason, we walk out Andy Dalton, Nick Foles, and a second, third, fourth round, mid-round quarterback, it's over, it's done. You might as well sell your season tickets because it's going to be mediocrity and probably below. And that's true. I mean, I do look at this draft or the quarterback class, and it is deep. And the problem is next year is not deep at all. No. So we do need to go for a quarterback here. But once you kind of get past the Mac Jones and you start kind of going into the weeds of the Kellen Moores, the Sam Esslinger, Kyle Trask at Florida. Once you start kind of going into that range, you're literally closing your eyes with a gun in pitch black and hoping you hit the target. You know what I mean? So it comes down to probably 4 people: Mac Jones, Justin Fields, or 5 people, I guess. Mac Jones, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, or no, 4, because there's no way we're getting Trevor Lawrence, and Trey Lance. I'm completely out on Trey Lance. I was out on him a long time ago.
I agree.
He had a horrible pro day, and Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy only went to his pro day to talk to Seattle.
Right.
So they weren't interested in what he was doing, clearly, because he had a bad pro day. Right. So then we're almost down to 3. I don't think we're going to get Zach Wilson. I think the Jets are going to talk themselves into drafting him and then trade away Sam Darnold. Fine, do it, whatever. So I think it's Justin Fields or Mac Jones. If we're going to trade up and get Justin Fields from the Falcons, the Panthers, that would honestly bring the most excitement. And, he's an Ohio guy, all that kind of different stuff. Mac Jones needs a little time, and maybe that's what they're trying to do. Maybe that's why the whole Andy Dalton came in. It makes a little bit of sense, but I mean, if they want to sell tickets, if they want to save their jobs, if they, unless an extension happened that we don't know, if Ryan Pace and them want to sell to the fan base, like, hey, we know what we're doing, they're going to have to trade up and hopefully not pull a Mitchell Trubisky again and, and draft Justin Fields, because that's the only thing that's going to bring excitement. It really is, or Zach Wilson. It's the only thing that's going to bring excitement.
Listen, I want Zach Wilson. I think you want anyone that isn't Zach Wilson. That is a legitimate.
Matt Jones and Justin Fields. I mean, if we don't, if we trade up, I want Justin Fields. If we don't trade up and we stay at the 20th and like Mac Jones slips to us, then take him. But like Justin Fields, honestly, I think Justin Fields even over Zach Wilson. I know Zach Wilson, he's the BYU guy. He's, exactly like, is exactly like Jim. And I get that.
Literally, he is Jim.
Jim, yeah, I get that. I totally understand that. But I think we need to go a completely different direction in the way of that. And honestly, bringing in a African-American quarterback from Ohio, a top player out of high school who's just dynamic as heck, doesn't talk, is very like kind of cut, boom, done, gets his work done, dominates, and has in the college level. Zach Wilson's just not a winner. You know what I mean? Justin Fields has won a lot of big games against good teams. So I think trade up Justin Fields. Don't trade up. I'm totally fine with Mac Jones if we don't.
All I'm gonna say is that the history of Ohio State quarterbacks in the NFL scares me, and
but he's technically not an Ohio State quarterback. I mean, and honestly, Joe Burrow technically broke that. Because he was an Ohio State QB, and then he transferred, and technically Justin Fields was a Georgia quarterback who transferred. So, I mean,
Burrow transferred out though.
Yeah, and
Fields transferred
in. Yeah, so I mean, technically, he's a Georgia quarterback.
All right, you know what? We're gonna wrap it up on that. But, in all, Bears fans, there is a need to be mad. There is a need to be frustrated. There is a need to not be shocked that Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy pulled a move like this. But they are known for being one of the most secretive duos in the NFL front office scheme. Khalil Mack happened. That just happened. Okay? A lot of things have happened with this team. The Bears are, again, a sleeping giant, but they're missing two extremely important positions on this franchise: head coach, quarterback. You fix those, I think the Bears could be a legitimate team. And that's not me being optimistic. That's what everyone says. Everyone's like, the Bears are just so close to being good. And people can go, oh yeah, they've made the playoffs the last 2 out of 3 years. Oh yeah, they've got a great defense, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. Talking and winning are two completely different things. And that's kind of where London and I are sitting at. Hopefully there's more to come. We will not be doing a podcast right away if Kyle Fuller does get released. That will just be a Twitter notification because, Kyle Fuller's always been that guy that always just seems to always be first in line to get the boot, even though he's done great things for the Bears. But his contract hurts. So more to come on that. But we hope you really enjoyed this episode. It's a very emotional episode for the viewer, for us. I mean, London and I were talking for about 20 minutes before this, just finding composure for this conversation.
Yeah.
So don't panic right away. Things are coming, hopefully. But if they don't be shocked. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Just Another Year Chicago. My name is Nick Roti. Again, I am joined by my co-host, London Beth. We had a great time today. We hope you did too. Go get some coffee, put a little Bailey's in it, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, Chicago.